Hi Year 13. Today's practical is a demonstration of core practical 11, which is a redox titration which aims to find the mass of iron in iron tablets. Now, we're actually not using iron tablets because the iron in iron tablets is not particularly soluble in water. I think that the iron is able to be absorbed in the body if you take iron tablets because of the acidity of the stomach. So we're using ammonium iron 2 sulfate instead, which is pre-crushed. Okay, so we've got pre-crushed iron 2 sulfate, and therefore we can miss out the first step, which is using a pestle and mortar to crush the iron tablets. So we're going to use about 1.2 grams of the crushed iron 2 sulfate. Mr. Leek did some fancy calculations to work out exactly the mass we needed to use. Mr. Leek is here, he'll be our glamorous assistant when we need him to be. So I'm going to add my weighing boat to my scales, and then I'm going to add about 1.2 grams to that. Now the reason why we're adding it to the weighing boat and including the mass of the weighing boat is because then we can take away the mass of the empty weighing boat, so we can find the exact mass of iron 2 sulfate that we've used. So the mass of the weighing boat and the iron is 4.09 grams. And then when I follow the next step, which is to empty the crushed tablets into the small beaker and reweigh the weighing boat. So I've got 250ml beaker, add my iron 2 sulfate to that. By weighing the empty weighing boat, this just ensures that if any has been left over on the weighing boat, that we account for that. So 2.83. We've therefore added 1.26 grams of iron 2 sulfate, which is fine, it's between 1.2 and 1.3. Okay, the next step is to add 100 centimetres cubed of 1.5 mole per decimetre cubed sulfuric acid. So I've got my 1.5 mole per decimetre cubed sulfuric acid. This only needs to be approximate, okay? So I'm just going to add it up to 100 centimetres cubed. And stir to dissolve as much as possible. It's mostly dissolved. The next step in the procedure is to filter the solution to remove any undissolved solids. If we were actually using iron tablets, then this would also be to remove the crushed up coating, which is on the outside of the tablet. Now, if we were to use the filtration step in this procedure, this would probably have a negative effect on our procedure because it would be removing some of our substance. So we're actually going to skip the step because we haven't actually used the iron tablets. Okay, so got my solution there. Right, next step, pipette 25 centimetres cubed into the conical flask. So I've got my conical flask and I've got my pipette and pipette filler, and I'm going to use my 25 centimetre cube pipette. Oh, not into the conical flask. I need to read the the instructions more carefully. Naughty Miss Allen. Filter the solution, rinse the beaker with more sulfuric acid and add the washings to the volumetric flask. Make up to the mark with the distilled deionized water. So we don't have a beaker to wash out, so we're just going to, oh no we do, we have this beaker to wash out. Okay, wash this beaker with distilled water. Make sure we've got all of our solution. Guess we could do that again just to make sure that we've got all of it. Okay, now make up to the mark. So I'll continue pouring until I get to the last bit. And now I'll put my lid back on here. I want to make sure the bottom of the meniscus sits on the line. Okay. Stopper and shake. Right, now we can use the pipette and pipette filler to accurately add 25 centimetres cubed of our solution to our conical flask. So, want to try and make sure that got exactly up to there. Got a pipette filler that works, which is novel. Only problem is that pipette doesn't fit down any further. Hopefully it shouldn't be an issue. Okay, should have got most of that out. Can just roll the pipette filler up a bit and then expel to get the last few drops out. Okay, pop my lid on there so that I don't knock it over. Okay, so I now have my 25 centimetres cubed of my iron 2 sulfate solution in my conical flask. Now it says to titrate the iron 2 solution with potassium manganate until the mixture has just turned pink. So, going to add my potassium manganate solution to my burette because the instructions say to titrate the solution with the potassium manganate, so therefore the potassium manganate goes into the burette. Now, the potassium manganate is a dark purple colour, as you've come across before, so that's going to make reading the numbers slightly more tricky, and it will make it more difficult to see where the bottom of the meniscus lies. So we actually have to read from the top of the meniscus. This isn't a major issue because as long as we measure from the top of the meniscus each time, we're still just measuring the difference between the two anyway. So I'm going to put it on a stool because I'm not very tall and I want to not pour it above my eye level. I've got my funnel, which I will take out once I've added it in. I'm pouring it into a beaker first so that I don't pour straight from the bottle, and also you can see the purple colour of it quite easily there. I'm going to make sure my tap is closed before I start pouring into there, but I will need to fill the jet, so I'll have a waste beaker as well. Okay. Oops, seem to be spilling potassium manganate on the stool. Need to remember not to sit on that stool. So I'm going to fill to just above 0 so that I can fill the jet. Okay, waste beaker. Taken my funnel out already, so I don't need to worry about that. And I'm just going to run it through so that it is starting at 0. It doesn't have to, but it just makes life a little bit easier. You can actually just about see the bottom of the meniscus, but we'll still run to the top. Oh, I seem to have a bit of an air bubble in there. Need to run it through a bit more, so I won't start exactly at 0. I guess I could always fill it up again, but I think that's just about okay. Okay, pop that to one side. So my initial volume for my first titration is, going with the top of the meniscus, just this one occasion, 6.3 centimetres cubed. Okay. Pop my lid back on my potassium manganate so that I don't spill that and make a mess. I've already made a bit of a mess, but never mind. Clear that up later. Okay, so titrate the iron solution with potassium manganate. So I need my conical flask, and I want to do that until the mixture has just turned pink. Now that might seem fairly obvious, but when you add the potassium manganate, the manganate, when it reacts with the iron sulfate, turns colourless. So when we've used up all of the iron sulfate, then it will no longer turn colourless, and we will know then to stop the titration. I'm just going to move this up a little bit so that I can fit my conical flask in. So I'm going to be swirling, looking at my conical flask and stopping when I have reached my end point. So I'm just going to turn slightly so that you can see better. So as you can see, we now have a slightly pinky coloured solution left over here. Okay, so therefore I'm going to write down my final volume, which is 21.4. and we can now repeat our titration until we get some concordant results. Okay, so okay, so I need to wash my conical flask with distilled water. Do that over a tap. I'm probably going to need to add a little bit more potassium manganate. So this was the initial one that I had there, not my waste beaker. Don't really want to use what's in my waste beaker. Okay, tap's definitely off. Shut. Actually added just a tiny little bit too much, so I can just run some off into my waste beaker again. Just literally needs to be a drop. Okay. So before I measure out my next 25 centimetres cubed of sulfuric acid, just going to update my values. So remember, we should be recording our values to 2 decimal places in titrations. So the previous titer was 15.10. Okay, so I've got my final takeaway, my initial, and I've recorded all of my values to 2 decimal places. My initial for this one is 0.00, so that's going to make the next bit easier. Now, this time when I measure my 25 centimetres cubed, I'm going to pour some of my iron 2 sulfate solution into a beaker because it's not actually physically possible to get the pipette any lower down in the volumetric flask. Glug, glug, glug. Okay. Don't need to wash this out because I haven't used it for anything else. This pipette filler's actually, although it's good, the wheel is a bit stiff. Make it a bit closer. Okay, and remember you can use the side bit here to release, which actually is a bit better because then you can use the pushing down of the this bit to release the rest of it, to ensure you've expelled as much as you possibly can. There's nothing left at all. Okay. Okay, so starting at 0 in this instance, but I'm going to keep an eye on the conical flask because I want to make sure that I'm seeing exactly when the colour has changed to pink. So roughly last time it was 15, so I could probably run it fairly quickly through to that point, and then when I get close to that, add it dropwise. I'm at 8 now. Still that pink colour's disappearing. Just okay, so that is 15.20, and we can see that the pink colour has just about stayed. So initial was 0.00, final was 15.20, so our titer there is 15.20, and you can see that my results there are concordant, so I don't need to do any repeat titrations. Okay, so that's the end of the practical procedure. In the live lesson, I'll go through with you the calculations as to how we use this information to calculate the mass of iron in those iron tablets. Thank you for watching.